court spelling your last name for the record?
Tyler Hartman, Hartman.
And Mr. Hartman, do you do anything for a living?
Well, I don't have a full-time job right now. That's because I just graduated high school, so I'm in between high school and my first year of college. But I do work part-time at a local bookstore, and when I'm not working there, I tutor high school kids in biology and physics. And that's obviously not when I'm enjoying myself at Rock World.
And do you spend a lot of time at Rock World?
Ever since I was a small child, I have loved going to Rock World. I'm familiar with the employee access tunnels. I know most of the employees. I'm even a member of the Rock World Loyalty Club, and I've been out to dinner with J.C. Longstreet no less than 3 times.
And Mr. Hartman, how well would you say that you know the park?
Between my time there as a child, a former employee, and now as a high school graduate, I know the park better than anyone.
And do you have any favorite rides?
I mean, obviously I love all of the rides, but my absolute favorites are the hamster wheel and the Tunnel of Terror.
Now, I'd like to talk to you a little bit more about the Tunnel of Terror ride. Could you describe for the court how that ride generally operates?
Sure, for being such an amazing ride, it's really not that complicated. There's a train of buggies, and the guests to Rock World get on the buggies, and the train goes off down this dimly lit tunnel where all these figures and scary noises try and get the guests to scare it. It's an awesome ride.
Now, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about something called blackout mode. Are you familiar with blackout mode?
Yes, blackout mode is used by maintenance after the park is closed to run rides with no lights and no sound effects.
And do you have any personal experience with blackout mode?
Well, I've been on a ride that was in blackout mode one time, but I've never actually seen an employee actually put a ride into blackout mode. That's on my Rock World bucket list of things to see, but I did have an employee one time show me what you'd need to do to put a ride in blackout mode.
And which employee was this?
Whit Bowman.
Now, if Miss Bowman were here in court today, could you identify her by an article of clothing?
Yes, she's wearing the red over there.
Let the record reflect that the witness has correctly identified Miss Bowman. The record will so reflect. Now, Mr. Hartman, I'd like to direct your attention to the day of the robbery, August 30th. Where were you that day?
I was at Rock World observing physics somewhere other than my textbook, and so I was having a great time.
And did you see anything unusual that day?
Yeah, I was getting on the Tunnel of Terror ride when I heard this super loud crack. It must have been the sound of a gunshot, so I looked off to where I heard the sound, and I saw the ticket booth attendant Cameron Poole being chased by a member of Park Security, Winnie Thomas, and they were headed straight towards the ride that I was on.
Now, Mr. Hartman, I'd like to slow this down a little bit and have you explain it for the court in a little more detail. Would a map be helpful?
Yes, it would.
Permission for the witness to step down to make use of a demonstrative?
You may.
Now, Mr. Hartman, what is this?
This is a map of Rock World.
And is it a fair and accurate copy of that map as you understand it?
Yes, it is.
Now, you mentioned that Cameron Poole was the ticket booth attendant. Could you locate the ticket booth for us on the map?
The ticket booth is right here at the entrance to Rock World. I'll write TV to identify it.
And what is the closest entrance to the ticket booth?
Right here is the main entrance to Rock World. You can either enter or exit the park there.
Now, can you show us where you saw the chase begin and in which direction it was headed?
Yeah, when I heard the gunshot, I immediately looked up and I saw Officer Thomas and Cameron Poole here, and they were headed right towards the Tunnel of Terror ride.
Let the record reflect that the witness has marked the ticket booth TB and he has drawn an arrow towards the Tunnel of Terror ride, which is previously marked as TOT.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Hartman. Permission for the witness to retake his seat?
You may.
Now, Mr. Hartman, what happened after you heard the gunshot?
Well, as a previous employee, I know park procedure, and according to procedure, when there's an emergency, the ride is supposed to shut down.
And is that what happened?
No, the ride just continued on like there was no gunshot or chase or anything.
Now, you mentioned that the ride continued on, but had the ride been moving before you heard the gunshot?
No, I was just getting into the front buggy of the ride.
So what happened next?
Well, Cameron Poole, being chased by Winnie Thomas, ran in the exit side of the tunnel, and he was headed for the emergency exit door, which is right in the path of the ride. And so I began to shout to prevent a collision. And then when Cameron Poole opened the door, all the lights and everything on the ride went black.
Now, Mr. Hartman, you just said that the ride went black, but the Tunnel of Terror was already a dim ride. So what do you mean the ride went black?
Well, the Tunnel of Terror is more dimly lit than the other rides at Rock World, but there's still spotlights and other lights for effect. And when the ride went black, all those turned off, and the only light that was in the tunnel was the light that was coming out of the emergency door from when Poole had opened it.
So what happened after the ride went black?
Well, there was this gut-wrenching shout, and my buggy had struck Officer Thomas, and he hit his head on the wall of the Tunnel of Terror ride.
And could you see if Officer Thomas was moving?
No, he was lying on the floor, and I couldn't get him into my buggy even though I tried.
Now, Mr. Hartman, did you know about this exit door before you saw Cameron Poole go through it?
Yes, I had heard Cameron Poole and Whit Bowman talking about it several days before.
Did you ever hear them talk about anything else?
Yeah, I had heard the two talking all summer.
Did you ever hear them discussing anything that seemed unusual?
Well, one time I heard Cameron Poole complaining about how he didn't have enough money for rent. And then Bowman responded by saying that he could go ask Longstreet for a raise, but then Whit quickly retracted that and said that, never mind, I have some different ideas of how to get you what Longstreet owes you. Let's talk about it later.
And did you ever hear any conversations similar to this?
Yeah, ever since I heard that conversation, I was on the alert, and one time I overheard the two talking in the employee break room.
And did they know that you were in the break room?
No, I was in a restroom stall at the time. I had to go in to reapply my hairspray, and I also really had to go.
Now, Mr. Hartman, what did you hear the defendant and Mr. Poole discussing at this time?
Well, Whit Bowman was telling Cameron Poole that she had a plan, and she was also patting this blue-handled knife in her pocket and said that she had some insurance policy if Poole ever needed it.
So how did this conversation end?
Bowman took the knife and put it into a locker and told Poole that you know where it is if you need it.
Now, Mr. Hartman, I'd like to discuss the timing of this conversation. When did you hear this occur?
It was just days before the robbery.
Thank you, Mr. Hartman. At this time, the state has no further questions. Okay. Ross? Would you like me to take it down? Please leave it.
Good afternoon, Mr. Hartman.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Hartman, you would spend a